There is a certain kind of person everyone has encountered, the one who smiles a little too easily, agrees a little too quickly, and never seems to have a problem with anything. Their words are soft, their tone is calm, and their behavior appears flawless. On the surface, they are everything society praises: polite, respectful, easy to be around. But beneath that carefully maintained calm lies something far less comforting, an emotional tension that cannot be seen yet can always be felt. You notice it in small, almost invisible ways: the compliments that feel slightly off, the agreement that carries no real support, the kindness that somehow leaves you uneasy instead of reassured. It creates a strange psychological discomfort, like standing in a room where everything looks normal but something is undeniably wrong. You cannot point to it, yet your instincts refuse to ignore it. Excessive politeness often disguises more than it reveals. It becomes a shield, one that hides frustration, resentment, and even quiet hostility. Instead of expressing emotions openly, they are buried under layers of controlled behavior and rehearsed responses. The result is not peace, but pressure, an internal conflict that slowly leaks out through subtle actions, tone, and energy. In a world that constantly rewards being nice, this behavior is rarely questioned. Politeness is seen as virtue, and those who embody it are trusted without hesitation. But when politeness becomes excessive, it stops being genuine. It transforms into something strategic, something controlled, something that can manipulate perception while concealing true intent. This is where the illusion begins, the belief that kindness and politeness are always the same thing. In reality, they are not. Kindness is honest, direct, and grounded in authenticity. Politeness, on the other hand, can be performed, and when it is performed too perfectly, too consistently, it begins to hide something far more complex beneath the surface. Hidden hostility does not shout, it does not confront, it does not make itself obvious. Instead, it whispers through behavior that seems harmless, even admirable. And because it wears the mask of politeness, it often goes unnoticed, slowly shaping interactions, relationships, and environments in ways that are difficult to explain but impossible to ignore. By the time most people recognize it, the damage is already done. Trust feels uncertain, communication becomes strained, and emotional clarity disappears. You begin to question your own perceptions, wondering if the discomfort is real or simply imagined. But it is real. And understanding it begins with seeing beyond the illusion of niceness. Hidden hostility is not loud, explosive, or obvious. It does not announce itself through anger or confrontation. Instead, it operates beneath the surface, quiet, controlled, and often disguised as calm behavior. It is the presence of unresolved anger, resentment, or irritation that a person refuses or is unable to express directly. Rather than confronting issues openly, these emotions are suppressed, redirected, and released in subtle, indirect ways. This form of hostility is most commonly expressed through what psychologists describe as passive-aggressive behavior. Unlike direct aggression, which is clear and easy to identify, passive aggression hides behind politeness, compliance, or silence. A person may agree outwardly while resisting inwardly. They may appear cooperative yet intentionally delay, withdraw effort, or create small obstacles that disrupt progress without drawing attention to themselves. The danger lies in its ambiguity. When hostility is hidden, it becomes difficult to confront because there is no clear evidence to point to. There are no raised voices, no harsh words, no visible conflict. Instead, there are mixed signals, behavior that appears positive on the surface but feels negative underneath. This creates confusion, making it hard to determine whether something is actually wrong or simply being imagined. At its core, hidden hostility thrives on contradiction. A person's words may communicate kindness while their actions quietly express resistance or resentment. They may say, "I'm fine," while their tone, timing, or behavior suggests the opposite. This disconnect between what is said and what is felt creates an emotional imbalance that others can sense, even if they cannot fully explain it. Excessive politeness becomes the perfect vehicle for this behavior because it provides cover. It allows individuals to maintain a socially acceptable image while avoiding the discomfort of direct expression. Instead of addressing conflict, they bury it. Instead of speaking honestly, they perform agreeableness. Over time, this creates a pattern where politeness is no longer about respect. It becomes a tool for avoidance, control, and quiet emotional release. Understanding hidden hostility requires looking beyond words and paying attention to patterns. It reveals itself in inconsistency, in subtle resistance, in the gap between appearance and reality. And once you begin to recognize it, you start to see that not all calm behavior is peaceful, and not all politeness is genuine. Excessive politeness is rarely accidental. It is often a learned behavior shaped by experience, environment, and internal emotional struggles. At first glance, it appears harmless, even admirable, but beneath it lies a deeper psychological need. People who rely on this behavior are not simply trying to be kind. They are often trying to protect themselves, control situations, or avoid something they find deeply uncomfortable. One of the strongest drivers behind excessive politeness is the fear of conflict. For many individuals, confrontation feels dangerous. It may remind them of past experiences where expressing anger led to punishment, rejection, or emotional pain. As a result, they learn to suppress disagreement entirely. Instead of saying what they truly feel, they choose the safer path, agreeing, smiling, and avoiding tension at all costs. But the emotions they avoid do not disappear. They remain beneath the surface, slowly building pressure. Another powerful motive is the desire for control. While it may seem passive, excessive politeness can actually be a subtle way of managing how others perceive and respond. By maintaining a calm and agreeable image, a person can influence situations without direct confrontation. They avoid accountability while still shaping outcomes. This form of control is quiet and indirect, making it harder to challenge or even recognize. There is also a deep need for social approval tied to this behavior. Society often rewards those who are nice, cooperative, and easy to deal with. For some, being liked becomes more important than being honest. They prioritize acceptance over authenticity, carefully managing their behavior to maintain a positive image. Over time, this creates a disconnect between their true emotions and the version of themselves they present to the world. Beneath all of this lies unexpressed resentment. When feelings are consistently suppressed, they do not fade, they accumulate. Small frustrations, unmet expectations, and unspoken disagreements begin to stack up internally. Because they are never addressed directly, they find alternative ways to surface. This is where subtle hostility begins to appear. through tone, timing, and behavior that quietly communicates dissatisfaction without ever stating it openly. Excessive politeness, then, is not just about being nice. It is often a coping mechanism, a way to navigate fear, maintain control, and secure approval while avoiding emotional risk. But in doing so, it creates a hidden tension that eventually reveals itself. What appears calm on the outside is often anything but peaceful on the inside, and that internal conflict is what gives rise to the quiet, almost invisible hostility that others begin to feel. The most unsettling thing about hidden hostility is how easily it blends into normal behavior. There are no obvious red flags, no dramatic outbursts, no clear moment where you can say, "This is the problem." Instead, it reveals itself through patterns, small, repeated behaviors that feel harmless on their own, but together create a sense of unease that is difficult to ignore. One of the clearest signs is over-agreement without real action. This is the person who always says yes, always nods, always appears supportive. But when it's time to follow through, something is missing. Plans get delayed, commitments are loosely fulfilled, and enthusiasm never translates into effort. On the surface, they seem cooperative, but their actions quietly tell a different story. It creates a gap between expectation and reality that leaves others confused and frustrated. Another common signal is the use of backhanded compliments. These are statements that appear positive but carry a subtle sting beneath them. The words may sound like praise, but the tone or context suggests something else entirely. It leaves the receiver unsure of how to respond, grateful on one level but slightly uncomfortable on another. This kind of communication allows hostility to be expressed without ever appearing openly negative. Subtle sarcasm disguised as humor is another powerful indicator. It often shows up as jokes that carry a hint of truth, delivered in a way that makes it difficult to challenge. If confronted, it can easily be dismissed as just joking, shifting the responsibility onto the listener for taking it seriously. This creates a safe space for expressing resentment while avoiding accountability, making the hostility both present and deniable at the same time. Avoidance of direct communication is also a key pattern. Instead of addressing issues clearly, the person becomes vague, indirect, or completely silent. They may say, "It's fine," when it clearly isn't, or avoid conversations that require honesty. This avoidance prevents resolution and allows tension to linger, often forcing others to carry the emotional burden of trying to figure out what went wrong. Perhaps the most telling sign is inconsistency between words and behavior. The person may present themselves as kind, supportive, and easygoing, but their actions create friction, distance, or discomfort. There is a constant mismatch between what is said and what is felt. Over time, this inconsistency becomes difficult to ignore, leaving others with a persistent sense that something beneath the surface is not as calm as it appears. Recognizing these signs requires attention, not just to what is being said, but to how it is being expressed and followed through. Hidden hostility does not reveal itself in obvious ways. It shows up in patterns, in contradictions, and in the quiet tension that lingers long after the interaction is over. Hidden hostility does not explode, it erodes. Its damage is not immediate or obvious, which is exactly what makes it so powerful. Instead of creating a single moment of conflict, it slowly wears down clarity, trust, and emotional stability over time. The person on the receiving end often cannot point to one specific incident, yet they begin to feel mentally and emotionally drained without fully understanding why. One of the first effects is confusion. Interactions no longer feel straightforward. Words say one thing, but behavior suggests another. You begin to second-guess your interpretation of situations, wondering if you are misreading signals or imagining tension that is not actually there. This uncertainty creates a mental loop where you constantly analyze small details, searching for clarity that never fully comes. Over time, this confusion turns into self-doubt. When someone consistently presents themselves as polite and agreeable, it becomes difficult to question them without feeling unreasonable. You may start to think the discomfort is your fault, that you are too sensitive, too observant, or overreacting. This internal questioning weakens confidence in your own perception, making you more vulnerable to manipulation and emotional imbalance. Another major consequence is emotional exhaustion. Interacting with hidden hostility requires constant mental effort. You are not just engaging with what is being said, you are trying to interpret what is not being said. This creates a subtle but continuous strain as your mind works to resolve the gap between appearance and reality. Over time, this drains emotional energy, leaving you feeling tired after interactions that should have been simple and easy. In environments where this behavior is common, such as workplaces, friendships, or family settings, it can create a toxic atmosphere without any visible conflict. Communication becomes unclear, trust begins to weaken, and people feel disconnected without understanding why. Because everything appears calm on the surface, the underlying tension is rarely addressed, allowing the problem to persist and grow unnoticed. Perhaps the most damaging effect is the loss of emotional clarity. Healthy relationships rely on honesty, even when that honesty is uncomfortable. Hidden hostility replaces clarity with ambiguity, making it difficult to understand where you truly stand with someone. Without clear communication, relationships become unstable, built on assumptions rather than truth. This is the quiet danger of excessive politeness. It does not break relationships instantly, but it slowly distorts them. It replaces openness with uncertainty, sincerity with performance, and connection with confusion. And by the time its effects are fully recognized, the emotional impact has already taken hold. Hidden hostility does not develop overnight. It is shaped over time, often rooted in early experiences where expressing emotions, especially anger, was discouraged, punished, or ignored. Many people who rely on excessive politeness were taught, directly or indirectly, that being openly upset was unacceptable. In such environments, silence became safer than honesty, and compliance became more rewarding than confrontation. In childhood, this pattern can begin in homes where peace is prioritized over truth. A child who expresses frustration may be labeled as difficult, disrespectful, or problematic. Over time, they learn to suppress their reactions in order to avoid negative consequences. Instead of processing emotions in a healthy way, they internalize them. This creates a foundation where outward calm is maintained, while internal tension quietly builds. Cultural and social expectations also play a powerful role. In many societies, being polite is not just encouraged, it is expected. People are taught to be agreeable, to avoid making others uncomfortable and to maintain harmony at all costs. While these values can promote respect, they can also discourage honesty. When the pressure to appear nice becomes stronger than the need to be authentic, individuals begin to prioritize image over truth. Power dynamics further reinforce this behavior. In situations where someone feels less powerful, whether in a workplace, relationship, or social hierarchy, they may avoid direct expression to protect themselves. Instead of risking conflict, they adapt by becoming excessively polite. This allows them to navigate situations without open confrontation, but it also prevents genuine communication. The hostility remains, just redirected into quieter, less visible forms. Over time, these patterns become automatic. The individual may no longer be fully aware of their own suppressed emotions. Politeness becomes a default response, not a conscious choice. But beneath that surface, unresolved feelings continue to exist, influencing behavior in subtle ways. Tone, timing, and small actions begin to carry the weight of emotions that were never openly expressed. Understanding where this behavior comes from is important because it shifts the perspective from judgment to awareness. Hidden hostility is not always intentional or malicious. It is often a learned way of coping with discomfort, fear, or past experiences. But even when unintentional, its impact remains real. And without awareness, the cycle continues, repeating itself in relationships, environments, and interactions over time. Open hostility is uncomfortable, but it is clear. When someone expresses anger directly, there is no confusion about what is happening. The tension is visible, the message is understood, and the situation can be addressed. Even though it may feel intense in the moment, it creates an opportunity for resolution. The problem is exposed, and once exposed, it can be confronted, discussed, or even resolved. Hidden hostility operates in the opposite way. It conceals rather than reveals. Instead of presenting a clear problem, it creates uncertainty. You feel the tension, but you cannot locate its source. This lack of clarity makes it far more difficult to respond effectively. Without something concrete to address, the discomfort lingers, unresolved and often misunderstood. One of the most dangerous aspects of hidden hostility is its unpredictability. Because it is not expressed openly, it surfaces in indirect and inconsistent ways. A conversation may seem normal one moment, then subtly shift in tone or energy the next. There are no clear patterns to follow, no direct statements to challenge. This unpredictability keeps others in a constant state of alertness, trying to interpret signals that are never fully explained. It also erodes trust in a way that is gradual but deeply impactful. Trust depends on consistency, on the alignment between what someone says and what they do. When hidden hostility is present, that alignment begins to break down. Words suggest calmness and agreement, while actions suggest resistance or dissatisfaction. Over time, this contradiction creates doubt, making it difficult to rely on the authenticity of the interaction. Another key danger is its ability to manipulate perception. Because the behavior appears polite and controlled, it often places the emotional burden on others. If someone reacts to the subtle hostility, they may appear overly sensitive or unreasonable. This shifts attention away from the behavior itself and onto the reaction, allowing the underlying issue to remain unaddressed. In this way, hidden hostility not only avoids confrontation, it redirects it. What makes it especially powerful is its invisibility. You cannot defend against something you cannot clearly see. There is no direct attack to respond to, no clear boundary to set. Instead, there is a quiet pressure that builds over time, influencing thoughts, emotions, and interactions without ever fully revealing itself. This is why hidden hostility can be more damaging than open aggression. It does not create a moment of conflict, it creates an ongoing state of tension. And in that tension, clarity fades, trust weakens, and communication slowly begins to break apart. Dealing with hidden hostility requires a different kind of awareness. Because the behavior is subtle, reacting emotionally or aggressively often makes the situation worse. The goal is not to fight or expose the person in a confrontational way, but to bring clarity into an interaction that is built on ambiguity. This begins with trusting your perception. That quiet sense that something is off is not random. It is your mind recognizing a mismatch between words and behavior. One of the most effective responses is calm acknowledgement. Instead of ignoring the inconsistency, gently bring attention to it. This does not require accusation or hostility. It can be as simple as pointing out the difference between what is being said and what is being done. By doing this, you shift the interaction from hidden tension to visible reality. The moment something subtle is made clear, it becomes harder for it to continue operating in the background. Setting boundaries is equally important. Hidden hostility often thrives in environments where people tolerate unclear or indirect behavior. When you establish clear expectations, such as direct communication, follow-through, and honesty, you reduce the space where this behavior can exist. Boundaries are not about control, they are about creating an environment where clarity replaces confusion. It is also important to stop rewarding excessive politeness when it lacks sincerity. Many people respond positively to agreeable behavior without questioning its authenticity. This reinforces the pattern. Instead, focus on actions rather than words. Pay attention to consistency, effort, and follow-through. When you respond to what is real rather than what is presented, you begin to shift the dynamic of the interaction. Encouraging direct communication can also help, but it must be done carefully. Some individuals are not used to expressing themselves openly, and pushing too hard can cause them to retreat further into avoidance. Creating a space where honesty is safe, where disagreement is not punished, can gradually reduce the need for hidden expression. This does not guarantee change, but it increases the possibility of more authentic interaction. At the same time, it is important to protect your own emotional energy. Not every situation can be resolved, and not every person is willing to communicate openly. In such cases, distance becomes a form of clarity. Reducing your exposure to unclear or draining interactions is not avoidance. It is self-awareness. It allows you to maintain stability without being pulled into a cycle of confusion. Dealing with hidden hostility is not about becoming equally indirect or defensive. It is about remaining grounded, observant, and clear in your own behavior. When you respond with calm awareness instead of reaction, you remove the conditions that allow hidden hostility to thrive, and in doing so, you regain control over your own experience. Hidden hostility is easy to recognize in others, but far more difficult to see within ourselves. It does not always come from bad intentions. Sometimes it comes from discomfort, from fear, from the habit of choosing silence over honesty. There are moments when politeness becomes a shield, when it feels easier to smile, agree, or avoid than to express what is truly felt. In those moments, the same patterns begin to take shape, quietly influencing behavior without full awareness. This is where the real insight begins. Not in identifying who is fake or insincere, but in understanding how easily anyone can fall into this pattern. The line between genuine politeness and hidden hostility is thin, and it is crossed not through obvious actions, but through small, repeated choices. Each time honesty is replaced with avoidance, each time emotion is suppressed instead of expressed, the gap between appearance and reality begins to grow. Awareness changes that. The ability to recognize this behavior both in others and within yourself creates the opportunity for something different. It allows for clearer communication, stronger boundaries, and more honest relationships. It replaces confusion with understanding and tension with clarity. Because in the end, real connection is not built on perfect behavior. It is built on truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. Not all silence is peaceful. Not all kindness is genuine. And not all politeness comes from a place of respect. Sometimes the calmest interactions carry the deepest tension, and the most agreeable words hide the strongest resistance. Seeing beyond that surface is not just a skill. It is a form of awareness that changes how you understand people and how you understand yourself. If this opened your eyes to the hidden patterns behind everyday behavior, then you're already thinking differently. And that's exactly what this space is about. Welcome to the Behavior Lab channel, where human behavior is broken down, exposed, and understood at a deeper level. This is not surface-level psychology. This is where you learn to see what most people miss and understand what most people ignore. Subscribe, stay aware, and step into a new level of perception. Because once you start seeing behavior for what it really is, you can't unsee it.
I walk this road in style. You